2011 was a fantastic year for games, and all you have to do is take a look back at some of those titles. Batman Arkham City released and was the sequel to the highly praised Arkham Asylum, and it mostly lived up to a lot of that hype. Dead Space 2, one of my personal favorites. It's one I'll never forget, one of my favorite games of all time, and as far as I'm concerned, it could be considered about as perfect a video game as one could ask for. The original Dark Souls released, and even now is considered the best in the series by diehard fans of the IP. You had Deus Ex Human Revolution also released in 2011. It's a stupidly good game with an even better soundtrack. I don't know if the gameplay mechanics hold up as well, but maybe we can explore that another day. I mean, you could really look at 2011 as one of the best gaming years ever. Maybe for some of you, it is the best gaming year ever. You had a new AAA Zelda game, you had stuff like Portal 2, Gears of War 3, Bastion, Super Mario 3D Land, Alice Madness Returns, Killzone 3, Battlefield 3, and to me that was the last time that Battlefield was truly great. Crysis 2, and then in the same month you had two juggernauts with Skyrim and of course Uncharted 3, both in November. Again, you know, just both of them really big games and sequels to games that were considered some of the best in the generation. Expectations for Skyrim were through the roof because Oblivion was amazing and the marketing for Skyrim, all of the hype, completely insane, absolutely ridiculous. Uncharted 3, of course, the sequel to Uncharted 2, which many consider the peak of the entire series. Some critics have even called Uncharted 2 the perfect game. It's been about 10 years since I last played Uncharted 3. My older YouTube channel was blowing up and the views were rolling in. I made all sorts of new friends, met a lot of really cool content creators here on YouTube because of the PlayStation 3 and some of its games, and you know, stuff like that, I'll never forget it. I wanted to see if the gameplay in Uncharted 3 and the level design was as great as I remember. And not only were Naughty Dog at their peak at this point, at least in my opinion, they were also top 3 best developers in the world at the time. I've always preferred Uncharted to a lot of their other games, including The Last of Us. It's no secret if you watch my channel what era of Naughty Dog and what Naughty Dog games I prefer. So, is Uncharted 3 still as good as I remember? Let's dig in.
But the dreamers of the day are dangerous men, for they may act their dream with open eyes to make it possible. This I did.
Naughty Dog has been one of the absolute best in the industry for quite some time. Undeniably one of the best first-party studios Sony has under their belt, and many still look at them for the technical prowess and getting the most out of the hardware that they're given. I think Uncharted 3 holds up very well, and it's just another testament to how good Naughty Dog actually is as far as the visuals and the overall technical aspect of these games go. Character models, lighting for the time, textures, some really interesting cloth physics, water and rain effects in this game are still mind-blowing to me. Of course, you know, you have stuff like Uncharted 4 and The Last of Us 2 that have come along and they blow it out of the water, but this game still doesn't look bad at all. Not to me. If you're sitting there telling me and thinking, hey, this looks extremely dated, I just don't know if we can be friends. There's just a really good handful of awesome visual moments in this game, but a couple that truly stand out. You have the ship chapter where Nathan is fighting off, you know, pirates left and right, and that airplane moment. That airplane moment, the whole setup, just getting on the plane itself, the plane ultimately going down in flames, and Drake just standing around in that beautiful sand. Even now, after all this time, it doesn't disappoint. And how about his hair? Like, Drake's hair, it's a little inconsistent because, you know, the hair on most of the other characters doesn't look nearly as good. But in 2011, there weren't a lot of games with better looking hair. For a 10-year-old game, this is still very impressive, and it's a really great looking game in my book and has aged a lot better than some of the others for that generation. If you've played one or two Uncharted games, you have a pretty good idea of what you can expect from the gameplay. While the shooting isn't as tight or as polished as, say, Uncharted 4 or Uncharted Lost Legacy, after returning to these older titles, I feel like the overall enjoyment factor, the fun factor of the earlier Uncharted games is still much higher. They feel more like video games to me, and that's really why I can still put them up on a pedestal. Some really solid elements, some really great mechanics in these games make Uncharted, and that applies to, of course, Uncharted 3 as well. Shooting, jumping and nearly falling, climbing a little and also nearly falling, getting back up to shoot some guys again, set piece, watch some cutscenes, and then you get ready for the next puzzle. That's Uncharted.
How about that?
You know, I couldn't put my finger on it, but something with the shooting during this playthrough felt a little bit off. Something wasn't quite right, and I felt a little bit silly when I later learned from a friend that you have to adjust a setting in the options to make the aiming feel a little bit more like Uncharted 1 and especially Uncharted 2. I was like, man, what in the hell is going on here? This doesn't feel as tight. This doesn't feel as good as I remember. And I know someone is definitely going to say that's what she said to that moment, and I totally set myself up for it. Anyway, so even though I didn't know about the option until the playthrough was nearly over, it's still a lot of fun to shoot guys and blow shit up in Uncharted 3. You just have to try and remember that this game came out in 2011, 10 years ago, and even though Uncharted 3 is still really linear like most of the Naughty Dog stuff these days, it does offer a lot more than your typical shooty McBang-bang third-person shooter. Uncharted 3 uses a cover system, but I think it uses it well. A lot of games in this era use cover systems, it's just that games like Uncharted and maybe one or two others always felt a cut above the rest. It's standard, but functional, and that's important. I think we're all pretty familiar with how this works at this point. You're pressing one button to get into cover, another to pull you out of cover, and then one to fire. So the blind fire option is also welcome because enemies get overly aggressive in these Uncharted games. So if they're not spamming grenades with pinpoint accuracy, the AI is trying to flank you, and they're not messing around at that point, especially if you're talking about the dudes with a shotgun and those guys with the high armored helmets. It doesn't usually take a whole lot to bring them down, but I would say do what you can to stay in cover in any situation, and don't be as reckless as I was during my many hours of playtime. Even on the normal difficulty setting, I'm telling you, Uncharted 3 is not messing around, and you can die fairly quickly, so I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it can feel like you're playing on hard or crushing if you're not careful. And even though I liked that you could use some stealth elements at certain points in this game, I forgot that you could do other nice things like shoot while you're hanging from a ledge of some kind, and then quickly release the trigger when you want to go back into cover. One super cool thing I like to do during combat, and this is if the opportunity presents itself, is run up on an enemy, shoot from the hip, but you don't want to kill him, so just shoot a couple of times and then use Drake's melee attacks to get some awesome takedowns and some really awesome animations to support them. Sometimes you'll even see Drake toss his gun at an enemy, they catch it and hold on to it for a second, they're confused like, wait, what in the hell am I doing? And you use that moment to finish them off. You can also get close enough to pull an enemy's grenade pin and then kick him away before it explodes. I mean, it's just crazy stuff like that. I mean, Naughty Dog is who they are. Respect. There weren't a lot of third-person shooters doing stuff like that. I mean, can you name me 5? You can't? That's what I thought. That sort of, attention to detail, that level of polish, not many in this genre. You know what I mean? So Uncharted 3 is special. It's Uncharted, and you're going to be doing a fair bit of climbing in this game, whether it's to, find treasure, look for the next puzzle, or simply climb your way to the next cutscene. You'll never be short of climbing or squeezing your way through the hard-to-reach places. As far as the puzzles themselves, none of them are too difficult. They're some of the best in the series, if not the best in the series, and I can remember only getting stuck on maybe one toward the end of the game for like more than 2 or 3 minutes. And we're not talking about, Portal levels of complexity here, and there's even games that are superior to that in terms of complexity with the puzzles. So yeah, Uncharted 3, not that challenging for the puzzles. You don't have to worry about, man, I'm going to be stuck on this for, an hour and a half. I'm not going to be able to figure this out, and I'm going to have to look at a YouTube video. That's not Uncharted 3. I enjoy them most of the time, and I'll be honest, I think it's a nice change of pace to break up some of the slow walking, climbing, and nearly falling a bunch of times, shooting and watching cutscenes. For me, I like stuff like that. Treasure hunting, pretty self-explanatory stuff, and it's not even something that you need to do unless you're trying to 100% the game or you're trying to get the platinum trophy, and I've already done that with the original 3 games for PS3. Not too sure if I want to do it again for these remastered ones on PS4, but it's tempting. It's very tempting because they're not difficult platinums. Uncharted 3 is still a lot of fun to play, man. I was never really interested in, the multiplayer efforts, and to be completely honest, the multiplayer efforts of Naughty Dog in general have always been kind of to me. So, the story, the campaign, the single player, portion of their games is where their strengths lie.
Listen, kid. I've had you back for 20 years. I'm not going anywhere. Obviously. I just want to make sure we're doing this for the right reasons. You got your pride all tangled up in this thing. It's making you reckless. I taught you better than that.
Drake's deception tells one of the better stories in the series as far as I'm concerned, even if the villains aren't as awesome and as cool as we would have hoped. Marlowe isn't awful, at least to me personally. I don't really feel like she's awful, but she's also nothing special. She never really comes off as someone that's, truly threatening as some of the characters from the previous games do, or even other games in this genre. Talbot is kind of the real threat in the story, but I feel more or less the same way about him. So of course, we return as Nathan Drake and we're up against Marlowe and the boring Talbot. She's the leader of this secret order that's been around for, 400 plus years. And the whole point of all of this is to obtain some ancient power of the Jinn. And you'll spend about 15 to 20 hours watching this unfold. For Nathan, it's something else entirely, something a whole lot different is driving him. And I think Naughty Dog did a really great job in this game of playing into the idea that he's no longer in this simply for the treasure, the money. He's in his bag in Uncharted 3. And I found he was a lot more aggressive in this game. He was a lot more sure of himself, something to prove. And not only something to prove to himself, but those that he cares about most. And that's probably just a really fancy way of saying he's become super cocky. And the thought of fortune is no longer enough to keep him going. He loves this life of risk and adventure, where Sully and company seem more or less ready to be done with this life, but there's too much pride involved for Nathan. But I especially liked moments that he and Elena shared. Naughty Dog and the actors, have always done a really great job of making their love story and the chemistry between them very believable. They fight and they have their issues, but they're in love more than either is willing to admit. Once again, you got Nolan North stealing the show, as he should. He is Nathan Drake in Uncharted, and even though this guy has been involved in so many other things, I don't think I could ever like those as much as I like this character. And ultimately, I think that's what continues to make Uncharted special. The characters, without a good lead and a really special supporting cast that they have in these Uncharted games, what do you really have in a game like this? For many Uncharted fans, I feel like this story wasn't as amazing and the pacing overall throughout the game wasn't as good as Uncharted 2, but I disagree. I think for me, I enjoyed it a lot more than any of the other Uncharted games. I feel Nathan's story probably should have ended here, even though I do feel like Uncharted 4 is a great game.
Easy, son of a bitch!
Uncharted 3 is still one of my favorite games of the PS3 and 360 generation. It's no secret by now, definitely in the top 20 and possibly makes the top 10 for that generation. There is no way I'm not throwing at least one of the Uncharted games into my top 10 for that amazing generation. Its visuals are still exceptional, the gameplay is still a lot of fun, and some of the best storytelling in the series. As far as I'm concerned, this was Naughty Dog at their very best. I think they peaked with the PS3 generation in terms of making games that are a lot of fun and feel more like video games than anything else. And I'm always excited to see what Naughty Dog does next, even if I don't agree with a lot of the things that they do now. I guess we do have the rumored Last of Us remake, but I don't think, and depends on when you watch this video, I don't think Sony nor Naughty Dog have confirmed that yet. So I already gave my thoughts on the Last of Us remake in another video. It's cool, but they're capable of so much more, and I think we all understand that. I say, make another Uncharted game that has nothing to do with Nate and Sully or any characters that have ever had anything to do with those two characters, or just make an entirely new IP. We know you're capable, we know you're talented, and I think many of you would probably appreciate the same. Thank you guys so much for watching, man. I do appreciate it very much, and in the next review, we'll take a look at Spider-Man 2018. I am looking forward to sharing my thoughts with you guys about that game. Again, thanks for all the continued support. It truly means a lot to me, and you'll be getting a lot more content in the future. Have a good one. Peace.